Hello, today I want to tell you about what it's like to live with a mother who has a mental illness. This is a story I couldn't tell for a long time. When you grow up in such a family, many things seem normal because you don't know any other way. But now, years later, I understand how hard and terrifying it all really was, and at the same time how impossible it felt to escape from it. It all began when I was 14. That strange age when you're no longer a child, but not yet an adult either, when you perceive the world mostly through emotions and confusion. My mother was studying psychology at the time. She was passionate about it, full of enthusiasm. It seemed she had finally found something that made her happy. But during one of her training sessions, some kind of conflict happened. At first it looked like nothing serious, just tension between her, the course leader, and a man she liked. Apparently the feelings were mutual, and I think that's why it all hurt her so deeply. It was winter. I remember that cold, not only outside, but inside our home. For about 2 weeks, my mother simply lay in bed. Back then, I didn't know what depression was. I thought she was just tired or sick, but she didn't do anything. She didn't move, didn't speak much, didn't cook, didn't go out. My younger sister and I stopped going to school and kindergarten because she couldn't take us there. Somehow it felt almost normal at the time, as if we were on an endless break, just waiting for something to change. Then I started noticing that my mother was saying strange things. She was constantly reading articles online about curses, possessions, energy fields, and mystical forces. At first I didn't pay attention, but slowly she began to believe that something supernatural had happened to her, that someone had cursed her, that what had happened during that training was not just a conflict, but a mystical event. I didn't know that these thoughts were symptoms of illness. I just listened, not understanding what was happening. Then the pendulum swung in the opposite direction. My mother suddenly became full of energy, but it wasn't real energy, it was chaos. She barely slept, stayed up all night walking around the apartment, writing something, reading, watching videos. She hardly ate, spoke quickly, excitedly, and there was that look in her eyes, that shining, feverish look I later learned to fear. During that period, she developed strange, obsessive ideas. She believed my younger sister was some kind of messenger, almost a prophet, who could transmit commands or instructions about what we were supposed to do. And she took those things literally. My sister could say, "Let's eat pasta for lunch, just playing around," and my mother would nod and say, "Then that's what we'll eat." For her, it wasn't a game. It was a sign, an order. I remember one evening especially vividly. I was shivering with fever. My mother suddenly decided that some kind of evil spirit had entered me, that it wasn't just an illness. She took eggs from the fridge and started rolling them over my body. Later I learned that's an old folk ritual meant to draw out evil energy. I lay there quietly, scared and confused, not angry, just frightened and deeply sorry for her. There was a period when she believed we had to wash constantly. We would take several showers a day to wash away bad energy or a curse. I thought she was just going through another strange phase, something temporary. But now I know it was part of her mania, and that everything she did had a logic of its own, a logic only she could see. One night she decided we had to go to a monastery. It was winter, around 4 a.m, dark and freezing. My sister and I were half asleep, wearing coats over our pajamas, while my mother drove with determination, convinced that someone there was waiting for us. Of course, the monastery was closed. We just stood at the gates while she cried and prayed. At that time, I had already begun to realize that something was very wrong, but I couldn't accept that my mother was mentally ill. I thought it was just a hard period, that it would pass. And sometimes it did. She would suddenly return to normal, calm, cheerful, cooking, laughing, being herself again. But then, after a few months, it all came back, like a dark tide. Once, when I was around 16, she had another episode. She told me she had seen a dead man lying beside us in bed. I didn't know what to say. She said it was a sign that one of us would die, or that my sister and I would never be able to have children. Then she turned again to my sister, the prophet. My sister played her usual game. Lift your right leg, now your left. I did what she said, and my mother looked at me with that intense, delirious stare and whispered, "Do you know what that means? It means you're lying in your grave." Those words still echo inside me to this day. Sometimes I managed to pull her back to reality for a moment. Once she received a text message that she thought contained hidden threats. She was terrified. I looked at it and realized it was just a wrong number. She had texted the wrong person. I calmly explained it to her, step by step, and I saw her eyes change. She understood for a brief moment that it was nonsense, that what she thought wasn't real, but that happened only once. When she was hospitalized the first time, doctors diagnosed her with schizophrenia. After she came home, she told me it was horrible there, that they injected her with things, treated her badly. I felt such pity for her. I decided I would never let her go back there again. That decision, I now understand, probably cost her life. Every time she began slipping into mania again, I stayed silent. I didn't tell anyone, didn't call for help. I thought if I just loved her enough, stayed by her side, I could help her. But I couldn't. I remember waking up at night and seeing light in the kitchen. That always meant it had started again. She couldn't sleep. She walked around, talked to herself, sometimes sang, sometimes cried. I would lie awake, listening, not knowing what to do. Years went by like that. My mother would go through cycles, months of calm, then mania, then depression. She kept searching for mystical explanations for everything. She had asthma, and I begged her to go to a doctor. But she said it wasn't a physical disease, that the problem was spiritual, that she needed to heal her soul first. She talked about energy cleansing, spirits, entities. She went to psychics, bought candles and crystals, performed rituals. I watched her slowly destroy herself. Last spring, she had a severe asthma attack. She refused to call an ambulance, saying it would pass like it had before. We waited. It didn't. When the ambulance finally came, the doctor scolded us. "Why did you wait so long?" And my mother, struggling to breathe, just kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Those were her last words. They took her to intensive care. She stayed there for 2 weeks. She had sepsis, pneumonia, untreated asthma, everything at once. And then she died. When they told me, I felt nothing, just emptiness. Later came the realization that deep down, I'd known this was coming. I just didn't want to believe that she couldn't make rational choices anymore. I thought she still had a choice, to believe in mysticism or in medicine. But now, I know it wasn't a choice. It was the illness speaking through her. After her death, I couldn't stop thinking about death itself. It became a shadow that followed me. Every time I said goodbye to someone, I thought, what if I never see them again? Because now I knew how easily life could end, how suddenly it could disappear. I have grandparents. I love them very much. But even when I'm with them, there's always this painful thought. They're old, and one day they'll be gone too. I can't stop thinking about it. When I finally decided to tell this story, I was scared. But I realized that silence doesn't help. The more we talk about our pain, the lighter it becomes. When I first spoke about my mother, I felt guilty, as if I were betraying her memory, exposing her suffering. But over time, I understood that it wasn't betrayal. It was acceptance, a way to make peace with what happened. I often think about what would have happened if I had called the doctors earlier, if I had insisted on treatment. Maybe she'd still be alive, or maybe not. But I know that at that time, I simply couldn't do more. I was a child, trying to handle what even adults couldn't. I want to say this to anyone who's in a similar situation. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't wait for things to fix themselves. When you live with someone who's mentally ill, you start to believe you have to handle it alone, that no one will understand. But that's not true. There are always people who can help. Doctors, psychiatrists, even just other adults who know what to do. If you're a child and you feel that something strange is happening at home, if an adult is acting unpredictably, please speak up. Don't be afraid to reach out. It's not betrayal. It's caring for yourself and for the person you love. For a long time, I blamed myself for not saving my mother. But now I know it wasn't my fault. It wasn't within my power. My only task was to survive, to protect my sister, to keep going. And I did. Yes, it's unfair. A teenager shouldn't have to bear responsibility for a sick parent, but life isn't always fair, and sometimes all you can do is accept it and move forward. When I think of my mother now, I try to remember not her illness, but her laughter, her warmth, her love of books, her desire to help others. I know that behind all the madness, there was still a person, my mother, who wanted to be happy, but just couldn't. I'm not telling this story for pity. I'm telling it because maybe someone who's living through something similar will hear it and understand. You are not alone. You don't have to be silent, and you are not to blame. The more we speak about things like this, the more chance there is that someone else won't repeat our mistakes. And with every time we speak, it gets a little bit easier to breathe.